Good afternoon, you guys. This is Dr. Eric Van Sluten. We're so glad you're joining us for this telecast. We're going to be talking today about a concept that I think is so unbelievably important for your care and for anybody else that you've sent to our clinic that we are serving. We're going to talk about how the spine uniquely affects the brain and how the brain affects the body. And this concept, I have to give a huge amount of credit in our profession to Dr. Holladay Chiropractic. She's a neuroscientist and a researcher that has written this wonderful book, The Reality Check. So my 2 cents, you need to be grabbing this book when you're waiting in our reception area or preparing for your adjustment, and let this enlighten your mind. I'm going to take a couple excerpts from this and really work on building core concepts about what's happening in your body neurologically. But I want you to build on that by actually picking the book up and reading it. What Dr. Holliday's done is she's taken very complex concepts and she's made them digestible for the layperson. So whether you're a doctor of chiropractic or whether you're a patient, this book is extremely appropriate, and most importantly, it's scientific. She's gathered a lot of evidence. She's worked on building a theory of what's happening with the chiropractic adjustment and how your body responds to it. And she just is a wonderful scientist. So take my word for it. This is a book worth picking up. You can see it's very well read. A lot of our patients have been doing so. So we're gonna, without further ado, I'm gonna jump right into the content of this presentation for our spinal workshop. Let's begin by talking about what the spine's role is in adaptation. So the spine's role in the brain adaptation, as Dr. Holladay states here, the results of our research studies have indicated that vertebral subluxation. So again, if you don't remember that S word, subluxation is when we have a pinch on the nerve root, or we have an obstruction with proper movement in the spine, and it interferes with proper systems the nerve system wants to send. So she's saying that the results of our research studies have indicated that vertebral subluxations, those dysfunctional spinal segments like I just showed you, lead to changes in the information that the spine sends to the brain. So the first concept I want to talk to you about is the fact that your spine is like an interface, like a computer interface to your brain. When you think about what an interface does, is that in a software system, it takes information from somewhere and moves it into another place and helps translate it so that it can be properly received in the other place. Well, your spine is very similar to that. Is that it's an organ of information that is constantly giving the brain an impression of what's happening in and around the body. Okay, so that is the first statement I want to give you, and then she's going further into that research by stating spinal function seems to be one factor the brain uses as part of its processing and integration of all information to create your inner virtual reality. So processing and integration, that means that as your brain's receiving information from the body, it's integrating it and then helping form responses. So the spinal function, the movement of the spine, this is why I'm always saying motion is, that's right, motion is lotion for the spine. Movement is life. And the healthier the movement of the spine is, the healthier the signals the brain's going to get. So spinal function seems to be part of one factor the brain uses as part of its processing integration to create your inner virtual reality. In other words, the way the brain perceives what's happening in and around your body. She continues, one hypothesis for why this might be is that your spine is being used by your brain as an indicator of your core body position. So your brain needs a sense of stability. It needs to know how to position, how to react to external environmental cues. And what she's saying is that it's possible that the spine is being utilized as a measurement of core position. And so when the brain gets altered signals, that is going to really alter its sense of core position. Vice versa, is the opposite also holds true. If we're centered and balanced and our spine is moving well and sending our brain better signals, the brain's going to have a better understanding of our inner virtual reality, a better ability to establish core position. And I like this particular avenue of her dialogue, is that really when we dive into the concept of subluxation, there are many things that happen before we may experience the consequence of subluxation. I've certainly talked to you at some point about the layers of breakdown in your spine. We've probably gone at some point over the spinal degeneration charts. Well, that's our camel with 999 straws on the camel. And what's the reality with the 999 straws? So the reality is that often we don't feel those, okay? It's very common that a patient will come in and say, I have no idea what happened, Dr. Eric. Literally, I was just sweeping the floor. I had a patient this week that said, I was just vacuuming, right? And the reality is that there's commonly a sequence of micro traumas, is what I call them, micro traumas that lead to that breakdown, and eventually that 1,000th straw is going to happen. So the straws building on your camel's back, she says, can include poor sleep, awkward postures, repetitive movements, lifting wrong, negative self-talk, and minor accidents. These are all sources of the straws on the camel's back that build and acquiesce to the point where we're eventually going to have a breakdown. And this is where we get into the dialogue about poor spinal dysfunction and how that's going to affect the brain. What she refers to as negative brain changes. So we're going to get into that. So as we talk about pain, dysfunction, in chiropractic care, let's dive into that a little bit, because most of you are here because that you had a problem. Something was wrong. And you consulted us for our help to help you get out of pain, but certainly we want to move and live life beyond pain. So here's what she says. The presence of pain has been shown to alter all sorts of aspects of how muscles are controlled by the brain, and therefore how they function. So once we're in pain, now remember there's 999 straws before that, so all of those repetitive motions that she talked about, poor sleep, awkward postures, all of those things precede pain. But once we experience pain, it even further adapts our body and our brain. So the presence of pain has been shown to alter how our muscles are controlled by the brain, and therefore how they function, okay? She goes further to say these kinds of maladaptive plastic brain changes, when you think about plastic, think about the property of bending. So it's dynamic and it can be changed. These kinds of maladaptive plastic brain changes are thought to be involved in the initiation of chronic pain conditions. So very commonly I'll see patients that have been in chronic pain, and it's like a worsening cycle. So usually they begin with some sort of ailment, they'll medicate that ailment. When that medication doesn't work, they'll take a stronger medication. When that medication doesn't work, they'll maybe get some intervention like a steroid injection, which actually we had an education piece out just recently that those steroid injections actually are no longer a standard of care in the orthopedic world. They cause long-term damage and inflammation and really present no resolution to the actual joint or tissue. It's not a healing experience. It gets you out of pain, but it definitely does not actually heal the tissue. And so oftentimes patients come to me and they've been doing all these things that are getting them out of pain. But the question is, why is the pain there to begin with? We haven't dealt with the subluxation and the 999 straws. We're basically taking that 1,000th straw and doing everything we can do to just quiet the signals. And I'll often tell patients that would be akin to me looking at a signal in my car, a red light saying I have an engine problem, and then putting a piece of duct tape on it, and then acting and carrying on as if there were no problem, right? And so patients often present to me when they've put the duct tape on that dashboard, they're medicated, they're getting steroid injections, maybe they've had surgeries. And now we have maladaptive plastic brain changes. The experience of pain in the brain is actually going to be a result of continued subluxation and continued adaptations in the brain that are considered negative brain changes. This is why often times you'll hear us say the pain is in the brain. Now, the paraspinal muscles, I dove into this briefly. These are really, really important in the understanding of how the spine affects and influences the brain. So she talks about the muscle spindles and the sensory motor integration. She talks about the muscle spindles and proprioception. So when you think about the way the brain's then controlling the spine, this is what I want you to consider. The muscles at the upper neck, right, and the muscles at the very base of the spine, those are most uniquely influential in the way your brain processes information. When we have altered motion in those areas, when we have subluxations, that really uniquely changes the way your brain's perceiving what's happening in and around the body. It even then consequently changes the way your brain responds. Those muscle spindles are an important part of what we're stimulating as chiropractors when we're adjusting the spine. What is an adjustment? An adjustment is me putting a high velocity, low amplitude thrust into the spine to correct that dysfunctional segment. When I'm doing that, I'm going in to the stretch receptors in the muscle. I'm doing a tissue pull. We're working with a lot of anatomy, not just the bone. In fact, I'm not actually touching the bone. I'm touching lots of soft tissue that's in and around the bone, and we're putting that high velocity, low amplitude thrust to release the joint past the elastic barrier, restore proper movement, and then when we restore proper movement, that changes the patterns of those muscles. Dr. Heidi Holladay says that those muscles and the muscle spindles are important in sensory motor integration. That means that the information the brain senses and receives from the external environment, it takes that sensory information and it processes it and produces a motor output. So the ability of the brain to integrate is highly influenced by these muscle spindles, and particularly the ones at the upper neck and the base of the spine. It's of no surprise to me that many patients carry their most severe subluxation patterns, guess where? That's right, it's in the upper neck and in the lower back. So muscle spindles also play a huge role in proprioception. So think about proprioception like this. You know, if you have your eyes closed, the body's ability to understand spatially where it's at is a product of proprioception, its ability to perceive things properly. And the muscle spindles are playing a big role in both of those things, in your sensory motor integration, taking information in and then generating motor output, and then also in your ability to properly understand where things are at. So again, she has a hypothesis. The brain, it uses the spine as a perception of part of its core positioning, the body core positioning, and then it's relying on the spine for a variety of cues. I don't want to pretend like we have all this figured out, but the point of this is that if you've been treating chiropractic like you come to get cracked, or you are here to just get an adjustment and feel better the moment you get adjustment, we need to work on some understanding here. The chiropractic is not about the crack, because you'll notice that I adjust many patients with gentle instruments and you won't hear any crack sounds. It's not about instant relief either. Otherwise, I would be guilty of being an Advil with hands. Chiropractic is about a system of assessing the spine for subluxation, correcting those subluxations so that the real doctor goes to work. The real doctor is your what? It is your nerve system. And now we're generating better understandings through people like Dr. Heidi Holladay, who's, by the way, she's both a chiropractor and a neuroscientist. But we're generating better understandings because we understand now, okay, the brain uses the spine as a sensory organ. It uses the spine as a sensory organ. When we change the quality and integrity of the spine, it's changing the way the brain perceives what's happening in and around us and our external environment as well as our internal environment. And so basically what we see in practice, and you know this if you've been under care for some time, chiropractic changes your life. It actually changes the quality of your life. And this is actually what's happening is that it's changing your brain. That's why on this book, the brain is held in the hands, right? Because she wants you to know that the result of her research is really that what's at stake is the brain and it's the nerve system. So, adjustments in some studies that they've done, adjustments evoke lasting EMG responses in the paraspinal muscles. So, myographic responses in the paraspinal muscles, which the paraspinal muscles are those muscles that run along the sides of the spine, okay? Subluxations likely alter the input from the brain to the deep paraspinal muscles, and those are uniquely influential, again, in the neck from here to here, okay, from here to here, and then back in the low back from here through here. And I was actually talking with the physical therapist recently, who's just a wonderful guy, and he actually loves these concepts I'm sharing. He researches himself a lot, and he was saying to me something very interesting. When the paraspinal muscles, particularly the multifidi, when they lose proper movement, and those are the ones at the deepest part of the spine, when they lose their movement and become atrophied, we see a fatty infiltration happen, and we believe that that's part of what it leads to a higher level of degenerative breakdown. And so good, well-meaning people are researching this stuff, and we're finding answers that help us understand, for me as a chiropractor, why chiropractic has worked all these years, and how we can continue to press that envelope to generate better results for our patients. So basically, poor information to the brain is the result of subluxation, right? The muscles modulate that information, the spine modulates that information, and when we adjust, we're doing broad tissue pulls on the muscle, ligament, and all of that anatomy in and around the spine. It's all part of that adjustment experience that changes the way the brain's perceiving things and changes the output of the brain. So let's talk about subluxations and neuroplasticity. Ultimately, the path of dysfunction here is we have altered input from the deep paraspinal muscles. It's going to lead to ongoing negative neuroplastic changes in the brain. Subluxations then continue to generate poor paraspinal muscle activity, which then generates poor muscle spine activity, and that leads to continuing negative neuroplastic changes in the brain. And the research suggests that spinal sensory information is important for the brain to integrate other sensory information. So that's really where the adjustment comes in, is that when we do the adjustments, we're allowing the brain an opportunity to see things more clearly. And this is my ask of you this week, is now that you know more information about why chiropractic care is perhaps more than an Advil with hands, right? Who is it that you know that needs to know what you know? And maybe how is it that then that's going to change the way with which you approach your care? Some of you, you may realize that, man, the moment I get on that table, something great is happening. 4 billion nerves are flowing from the brain to the body. And the moment I get adjusted, my vitality is heightened. We are at our best state neurologically, posturally, and otherwise. And I like to talk about the hierarchy of needs. At the very base of that hierarchy, we have food, right? We can obviously live with food. We can live without food for many days, but food's an essential part of our healthcare, right? Above that, we have water, and we need water even more than food. So in terms of a hierarchy, water sits above that, and we can probably go a fair amount of time without water, but eventually that's going to become a compromise to our health. Well, next up on that totem pole in the hierarchy of needs is oxygen. And oxygen is an essential part of health and healthcare. And when oxygen suffers, right, as we found out in so many contexts recently, then the brain suffers, the heart suffers, so many bad things happen when we don't have proper oxygen. So that's part of our healthcare. But at the very top of that hierarchy sits nerve flow. And we know that when nerve flow stops, when there's a stoppage of information from the brain to the body, or when we have injuries to the brainstem that we've heard of stories, it stops life immediately. That's a scenario where we realize that's where our understanding of chiropractic needs to be at, is that if we're improving nerve flow, this is an essential part of healthcare. And that's the way I want you to receive chiropractic adjustments on the table, is realizing that every adjustment is building to a healthier brain, a healthier perception of what's happening in and around your body. And as we adjust your spine, it's going to allow your brain to make your spine relax even more. So it's a cyclical effect. But embrace these concepts, share it with someone you love, and we want to thank you, by the way, for how you support our practice and sending the people that you know need our help. There's no way that we could help all the people that we do, because we can't reach into their lives or their stories. We can't intervene like you can, and so we just want to, from our team, thank you from the bottom of our heart for doing that. And we look forward to seeing you for your next adjustment, where we're going to be transforming your health one more adjustment at a time. I'm Dr. Eric. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next workshop.